here with Miss Lou Champion Spotlight. Today we're going virtual with Mr. PD Mangan from California. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thanks, Ronnie. How are you doing?
Doing well. We appreciate you. I know you're a busy man, and we appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
So a quick introduction for those watching. So you have I looked you up. You got right at 230,000 Twitter followers now, which is pretty awesome. You got a great following. And I say you describe yourself as a health and freedom maximalist. I like that. You're an author, a health coach who has helped thousands of men and women throughout the U.S. and beyond. And you have a background in microbiology, biochemistry, and pharmacology. Am I missing anything in there? That's a lot.
I think that about covers the most pertinent facts. Yeah.
So my goal of this interview for people watching is to share some of the interesting things that I've learned from you over the last, 16, 20 weeks or something like that since we met, and you've been helping me with some things. And my goal is just to share some of this information with people in our area, which we call the Miss Lou, just to maybe get people thinking about different things. So
yeah, that's great. Absolutely.
Let's dive in a little bit with your so you have a pretty unique story and kind of how you got to this point with being a health coach and where you got. So let's hear a little bit of your story and your background, please.
Okay, sure. So yeah, like you said, I have a background. So I studied microbiology and biochemistry and pharmacology in university, and worked as a clinical microbiologist most of my life. I took an interest in health and fitness pretty early on in my life. I didn't do much as a teenager or anything, but by the time I was in college, I thought I should get in better shape and all this. So I did, I've started exercising and trying to figure out diet and so on. Eventually, I took up running. So this would have been in the 1970s, and the running craze was just kind of getting going then. In fact, when I first heard about it, I thought, wow, why would anybody want to go out running? But but I tried it and kind of liked it. It was hard at first, but I kept doing it, and I eventually got to be something of a running addict and was running every day. I've completed a couple of marathons in my life, that sort of thing. So I was very much into it, and I wanted to be healthy. Obviously, getting into health and fitness, I kind of trace back my interest in health and fitness beyond, like anybody else's normal interest, to my father. So my father was a doctor, and he suffered from heart disease. He's, at a relatively young age, about 50 years old, started having chest pains and this kind of thing. Right. And, he eventually lived a good long life, but he dealt with this problem the rest of his life. And I decided that, I didn't want that to happen to me, because this would have been like in about the mid 1960s. And this was the peak of the, heart disease for American men. This is, when you had the kind of classic, men clutching their chests and keeling over, so now heart disease has kind of shifted more to older people. But at the time it was just, national crisis, really. Yeah. I mean, when Eisenhower had a heart attack when he was in office, and that's what really brought attention to this thing. And anyway, lots of American men were. Anyway, that's kind of where my interest arose. So anyway, there I was doing a lot of running, and so I didn't want to, I wanted to be healthy, and I was following mainstream advice. So among other mainstream pieces of advice then as now was that saturated fat was going to kill you. It's going to clog your arteries and kill you. So I decided, well, and then people were saying being a vegetarian was the way to go, right? In other words, to avoid heart disease. So I did that. And so there I was going along and really most of that time I was a vegan as well. In other words, no animal products. So I did this for a number of years. I did okay for a while. But then when I was in my 40s, I became ill, went and saw a number of doctors about it, lots of doctors, in fact. Nobody could figure out what was wrong with me. Eventually getting a diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome. So that's one of these things, chronic fatigue syndrome. That means you're tired, but we don't know what the hell is causing it, basically. And so anyway, I kept going to doctors. I did find one good doctor, kept going to him, but eventually I had this thing for years. And so somewhere along in the middle of it, I kind of thought, I don't know what took me so long, but I kind of thought, well, if I'm ever going to get better, I got to figure out how to do this myself. Or at least I can try. So like I was saying, I have the background in microbiology, et cetera. So I knew how to look into the scientific literature and everything. So I dove right in and started looking. And, what I found there at first was kind of startling, because a lot of it went against a lot of the mainstream ideas that I thought were true. So in any case, I changed my diet. I started eating a largely animal-based diet, plenty of meat, eggs, dairy, and so on, and started feeling better. And after a while, I felt well enough to start exercising again. I decided I wanted to lift weights, because by this time in my research, I uncovered the importance of how important it was to have muscle. That is not just some kind of vanity or something like that. Very important for health to have muscle. This was another one of those odd things that, the mainstream never talks about. So anyway, I started lifting weights, joined a gym. It was very hard at first, but I didn't look back. And basically, within a few months of all this, I was feeling much better. I added on a lot of muscle. I was pretty skinny when I started, and I gained about 25 pounds in the first year of doing this. A lot of that, hopefully most of it, muscle. And then, so there I was, pretty much all better. And I had kind of said to myself during my illness that if I ever figure this out, I should write a book about it. So there I was, this thought came to mind. I said, okay, I'll do that. So I wrote a book about it, a short book called Smash Chronic Fatigue. And I put that up on Amazon Kindle. And there it was. And so then after that, I thought, okay, well, what do I do now? And then I thought I kind of liked writing that book, and kind of liked the studying of health and fitness and biochemistry and all the other things. So maybe I'll write another book. So I did. And then I kept at it. I've written a total of 7 books. And so then eventually I got on Twitter, and, I have a website, of course, too. And then I just kept at it, on Twitter, kept working pretty hard at it. It's a great platform. You can have a really wide reach on that. So that's basically what I did, and how I, became a health and fitness coach. Basically, I haven't written a book in a few years. And so, I'm doing other things to make a living, like, basically health and fitness coaching now. So that's, in a nutshell, where I started, and why I'm here right now.
That's interesting. My buddy Kevin Laird, who hired you a while back, called me and said, "Man, you got to meet this guy. You've got to talk to him, and this and that." And he kept telling me, and I could tell by his enthusiasm that it was something that really. And looking at him, I mean, he went from I think he was like 235 or 240, and I think he went down like 200 or something. And but he wasn't. He was excited about losing that weight, but he was more excited about like the energy and the lifestyle change that it had brought to him, and that it wasn't all about some fad diet or something like that. It was a mindset, really. So I said, "Hey, let's try it out. Let's do it." And then whenever we met, I kind of told you my background with my back and everything, and you said, "Hey, we can work around anything," and that's what I really liked about it. But from meeting you, though, I've learned a lot of. I'm still learning them, but I've heard a lot of things that have been planted into my brain for the first time. And I'm like, wow, never thought about these things. And one of them was talking about whenever you were talking about losing weight, and maybe a lot of people think about this, but I never did. And you were talking about maybe some of the shows where they lose a lot of weight fast, and you were like, not all weight loss is great if you're losing the wrong kind of weight. So that kind of stuck out to me. But then also the question I'm going to ask you is, we could talk a little bit about that, but we talked about how we have a epidemic in this country of obesity, and how did we get here?
Yeah, that's a good question, and you'll hear a lot of different answers depending on whom you ask. I think in my and there could be a number of different factors. So I don't want to oversimplify or anything, but to my mind, the biggest factor is that people are eating ultra processed food. And this is the kind of food, the ultra processed food is a sort of term of art that nutrition scientists use to talk about these things. But what it basically means is food that's made in a factory that comes in boxes, bags, cans, bottles, if we're talking about soft drinks and that sort of thing. That's ultra processed food. So what is this stuff? Well, first of all, why is everybody eating so much ultra processed food? The thing is, like when I was a kid, we didn't really, I wouldn't say we were health nuts by any means, there's all kinds of stuff going on, but yet obesity rates were way, way lower than now. So why is that? Well, one thing that happened was in the late 1970s, the US government decided that saturated fat was bad and was giving people heart attacks. And so they advised people to eat less meat and eggs and to eat more carbohydrates. In other words, grains like wheat, bread and rice and potatoes and things like that. Those are carbohydrates. Well, people largely complied, and the market was flooded with all kinds of low-fat products and so on. So the thing is, when the government told people to eat less meat and eggs and more carbohydrates, then people started getting less protein. And protein is the part of food that makes people less hungry. So there's a good argument to be made that the fact that people were now not getting enough protein made them hungrier and they ate more. There are other things going on that people will talk about as far as hyper palatable foods. In other words, basically the idea here is the foods taste so good that you can't stop eating them. So these ultra processed foods, there are three more or less key ingredients that most of them contain. That is flour, that is sugar, and that is seed oils or vegetable oils. All of these things are really cheap. And, if you're a food company, you can make some kind of concoction and then you have a brand name and you slap this fancy packet, put it in a fancy package and advertise the hell out of it. And now you're making a lot of money from something that's fundamentally pretty cheap to make. Mm-hmm. So people are eating massive amounts of this. You hear there are other arguments about the obesity epidemic, for example, just the seed oils, vegetable oils. Mm-hmm. So these are in everything, all kinds of packaged processed foods. Restaurants use them all over the place. So people are typically, and of course you can buy them in the supermarket and bring them home and cook your own food in them. And people do all these things. Mm-hmm. And so people are getting massive amounts of them. There's some figures that show that we're consuming something like 6 or 8 times more of these particular fatty acids that are in these seed oils than we were a few decades back. And there are good reasons to think these things are involved in obesity. So there are all these things going on. At this point, I guess, the question is what to do about this.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So I personally think that if we're talking about on a policy level, like in other words, if the government or if some, interested group is trying to change things at a high level, I have to say, I think it's pretty hopeless. People don't want to change. And some of these things, people like for one thing, people like these foods really a lot, and they're eating them a lot. And for another thing, because of what I said about the ingredients and the advertising and so on, these foods are very profitable. So you've got two sides of the supply and the demand equation here. The demand is there, and the supply, they're eager to make money. So therefore, all the incentives are in place for all this food to just stay where it is.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm not saying nothing can be done, but obesity rates keep getting worse year after.
You're saying on a macro scale, it's probably not going to change.
That's right.
But on a micro scale, maybe people do have options.
Absolutely, they do. Absolutely, they do. And this is the thing. It's going to be an individual choice. Mm-hmm. There are a few problems with this. For one thing, okay, a lot of people would like to lose weight. All right, so 80% of the population is either overweight or obese, and obese just means really overweight. Mm-hmm. But so that's a huge number, and another 10% of the population are what you could call skinny fat. In other words, they're of normal weight, but they're carrying too much body fat and not enough muscle. So 90% of the population could do some work. And I know, of course, a lot of people want to lose weight. So how do they do this? The thing is, the advice they hear from on high, whether it's from government or healthcare agencies or the mainstream media, most of it is terrible advice. So, like, for example, I think you alluded to this already, burn a lot of calories and starve yourself. So that's kind of, that's maybe a little bit of a caricature, but yeah, that's mainstream.
Well, I think that's the first thing that people think about is, count your calories, just less calories and this and that.
Right. I mean, so like, yeah, that, and that's what people think. And it's just, in other words, eat less and move more is the way some people put it. Right. And it's just terrible advice. If it worked, because that's the advice doctors give, that's the advice you hear from the mainstream. If it worked, nobody would be overweight, but it doesn't work. One reason is because it doesn't take account of people's hunger. Hunger is a very powerful drive. I mean, we wouldn't be here if our ancestors, didn't feel hunger, right? I mean, it's just, it's a matter of survival. You hunger, right? You can only withstand it for so long. And
willpower is not that great for any of us. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So when you're counting calories, you're just using willpower. Mm-hmm. So this kind of advice, and then furthermore, as far as exercise goes, this is just so common as far as people think you got to exercise a lot to lose weight. So in other words, to burn calories, as they say. Well, exercise doesn't burn that many calories as people think. For example, if you went out and ran 5 miles, which is a bout of exercise that most people would consider quite a bit. And I would too. 5 miles, that's a lot. Yeah. So what do you burn in 5 miles? Well, you burn about 500 calories running 5 miles. And, that isn't that much. Furthermore, if you just sat there in your chair for that, say, an hour that it took you to run 5 miles, you're still going to burn 100 calories. So the exercise is only burning 400 more calories than just sitting there. Furthermore, then the body compensates. If you burn a bunch of calories during exercise, then your body will reduce physical activity elsewhere, or maybe its metabolic rate, so you don't burn as much. And then another thing that people don't consider, exercise makes you hungry. So all these things, unless people are eating right, then exercise is not going to be particularly helpful in terms of losing body fat. But this is the advice they get. If you read a magazine or read a website or talk to your doctor, doctors, in fact, they suffer from the same maladies that are going around everywhere. Well over half of all doctors are overweight. And, you think about that. Okay, doctors. So what does it take to be a doctor? Well, basically 8 years of higher education, of studying so hard and massive amounts of work. And then you got, a year or two of internship and residency, more if they specialize. In other words, doctors have a lot of work ethic, willpower. They can, they're generally, top-notch people. They're certainly not dumb. And yet more than half of them are overweight. So what does that tell me? It doesn't tell me that they lack the willpower or drive to lose weight. What it tells me is they don't know how. And yeah. And so people go to their doctor, the doctor tells them to lose weight. And then, then the patient will say, well, how? Well, I don't know, just lose it.
Eat less, move more.
Yeah, eat less, move more. Right.
Yeah. So what you're saying, it's a fundamental flaw in that the advice on itself, maybe neither one of those things are bad, eat less or move more, or neither one of them are bad things. But you're saying that advice in a vacuum is just not reasonable because of willpower, because ultimately willpower is going to give out. Is that sort of
that is correct. That is correct. It's not in itself bad advice, but yes, using your will to eat less and to move more is just, sets you up for in the longer term failure. What you want is to be able to do this naturally, and people seem unable to do this naturally because of the ultra processed foods, for one thing.
So what are some, without giving away everything, what are some things on a more positive note, if somebody's watching this, what are some things that somebody could do to help themselves out?
Well, getting back to the ultra processed food thing, that is the single biggest thing there. So in my opinion, that's the single biggest thing driving the obesity epidemic. So a real simple rule of thumb is that these ultra processed foods are sold in the middle aisles of the supermarket. And the real whole foods are sold on the perimeter of the supermarket. And it's interesting because I have talked to people, I've coached people all over the world, and, like in India and in South America, and everybody tells me that the processed and packaged foods are always sold in the middle of the supermarket, no matter where it is in the world. They've got that figured out because that's what they want you to buy. That's what's most profitable. And the real whole foods are sold on the perimeter of the supermarket. So real whole foods, we're talking meat, fish, eggs, dairy, fruits, and vegetables. This is so in what I would call real whole foods. So if people were to make that one switch and stop eating the stuff that's in the boxes and bags and cans and bottles and eat real whole foods, that would be huge, in my opinion.
So that's something that people could do right there. Easy, it's easy, maybe not easy to apply, but it's an easy concept. Yeah.
An easy concept. Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, people want all kinds of convenience and everything. And that leads them to, eating these ultra processed foods and going to fast food restaurants and all this kind of thing. But if they were shopping around the perimeter of the supermarket and making their meals at home, just that alone, in my opinion, would make a huge difference.
Okay. And in a minute, I want to get into some stuff about metabolic health, but I just want to challenge you a little bit because in case somebody's out there watching this, what if there's somebody out there that's saying, well, you shouldn't eat meat and this and that? Like, why do you prefer this method versus their method?
Right. So, that's a big topic, certainly. So the original impetus to not eat meat came from what I was talking about before, about the idea that saturated fat causes heart disease. And that it has been effectively debunked. Even, in the last few years, you can read even in mainstream nutrition journals talking about this, a number of articles and studies have come out saying, look, saturated fat does not cause heart disease. Furthermore, the evidence that meat might cause cancer is extremely weak, and has been blown out of all proportion. Basically, again, that's a whole separate topic, but it's politics. And so there is no reason for health purposes not to eat meat. And there are, for instance, vegetarians and vegans do not live longer than meat eaters. So that line of argument doesn't work either. So that's how I see it. And furthermore, meat and other animal foods have been a part of the human diet for a long, long time. So if you go back, whether you want to call it nature or whether you want to call it evolution or anything like that, the fact is humans have eaten meat for a long, long time. And we did not suffer from heart disease or cancer or any of these other things. It wasn't until, the invention of agriculture that we started, and this was only in human historic terms, not that long ago, a few thousand years ago, that agriculture was invented. We started eating massive amounts of things like wheat and rice and corn. And furthermore, it was only about 150 years ago that humans started eating ultra processed food in any amount. In other words, they figured out how to make. So basically, in the middle of the 19th century, they developed huge milling machines and factories to make this kind of stuff. White flour was developed because they had to have these milling machines. Vegetable oils were discovered. So, I mean, they couldn't make. The way vegetable oils came out was because somebody invented a big milling machine. So obviously, if you can imagine, let's say corn, how do you get oil out of corn? It doesn't look like there's any oil in there. So you need massive amounts of it to squeeze oil out of it. And you need heavy industrial milling machinery to do this. And somebody got the bright idea at the time, cotton seeds. Cotton seeds were a waste product. They get the seeds out of the cotton. Yeah. Okay. Now we got the cotton. What do we do with the seeds? They were throwing them out. And, somebody said, well, how can we make money on cotton seeds? Oh, I know. Put them in this milling machine and get the oil out of them. And so that was cottonseed oil. Vegetable oils were born. That's how that happened. So that was only about 150 years ago. And then also around the same time, sugar was becoming massively cheaper. So when sugar first came into the Western world hundreds of years back, it was pretty expensive. Like royalty and nobility were the people that were consuming sugar because they were the only ones that could afford it. But then again, with all the various machinery and economic development and so on, sugar became much cheaper. So there you have, by the end of the 19th century, this perfect trifecta of terrible food. We had refined flour and refined grains, we had sugar, and we had vegetable oils. So these didn't take off all at once, although in the early 20th century, around 1911, Crisco was invented. So again, somebody came up with, how do we take vegetable oil and make it into this solid product and everything? So they made Crisco, and this became very popular. And it's perhaps not a coincidence that heart attacks started rising around this time. So anyway, all the consumption of all these things increased and increased. So anyway, in terms of our human biology, these kind of foods are foreign, you could say. We're just not meant to eat them. We're meant to eat meat, animal foods, some fruits and vegetables, things like that. That's what we're designed for.
That's interesting. And then one more thing before we get into the metabolic health. Another thing I'm just thinking about is grass-fed versus non-grass-fed and all that. I'm very ignorant as far as this goes, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Sure. So the idea, the main difference between grass-fed beef and grain-fed beef is it has to do with the fatty acid content in the tissues of the meat. So this gets into a bit of complexity here, and just to keep it real simple, about omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids. So generally you want less omega-6 and you want more omega-3. So the thing is, how much benefit do you get from grass-fed beef versus grain-fed beef? The thing is, if you eat anything else at all, you're going to get massively more of these omega-6 or omega-3 fatty acids. For example, if you eat chicken has a lot of omega-6 fatty acids. So this is going to if you eat any chicken at all, even once a week, let's say, and you eat grass-fed beef the rest of the time, eating the chicken is going to swamp any benefits you get from the grass-fed beef. Likewise, if you eat any fish like salmon is, of course, a very healthy food, very high in omega-3 fatty acids. If you eat fish once a week, this is going to swamp any detriment you might get from grain-fed beef. In my opinion, grain-fed meat, basically what I call supermarket meat, is perfectly healthy, and most people would be doing just fine by starting there. Certainly, if somebody had the money and they were super interested, grass-fed beef is fine, might offer some marginal benefit. But also, I feel that when people insist on the superiority of grass-fed beef, they are doing people a disfavor, because people hear that and they say, well, if I can't get grass-fed beef, then I'm just not going to eat meat. And I think that's not good. I think people need to hear that, getting a piece of meat at the supermarket is going to be vastly healthier than almost anything else people are eating now.
Okay. So let's jump into the metabolic health. I never really, which I'm not in the science world whatsoever, but I never really heard this term. I guess I'd heard it before, but I never really thought about it. What is metabolic health, and why is it important? What do we need to know about that?
Right. Well, so metabolic health basically means that your metabolism, which is how you handle food and energy, and how your body maintains itself. When you have good metabolic health, then all this stuff is functioning very well. Now, probably one of the best measures of metabolic health is what is known as insulin sensitivity. So this is something that can be measured, and people lose their insulin sensitivity and become insulin resistant. And when they become insulin resistant, well, there's a lot of debate on what is cause and what is effect here, what is in effect. But certainly insulin resistance is highly associated with obesity and with eating lots of carbohydrates and lots of junk food, this sort of thing, lack of exercise. So this is insulin resistance. So why is this important? Insulin resistance is associated with virtually every chronic disease you could name, whether it's heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, sarcopenia, which is loss of muscle mass in old age, type 2 diabetes, obviously. So gout, all of these things are all related to insulin resistance. This is why it's so important. So how do you keep good insulin sensitivity? Basically, it's by maintaining a good body composition, which is a relatively low level of body fat and a relatively high level of muscle, and this includes men and women. And by eating a healthy diet that is relatively low in carbohydrates. It doesn't have to be zero carbohydrates, but most people are eating far too much, not consuming sugar, or not consuming very much sugar anyway, or seed oils at all. So it's basically healthy diet, getting enough protein, exercise, maintaining yourself at a normal body weight and good body composition. And that's how you get good insulin sensitivity, and that's how you stay free of chronic disease, how you prevent chronic disease.
One of the videos that you have in your program, I may get this wrong, but I found it very interesting. You were talking about just what you were saying a second ago with the insulin levels and how much of an indication insulin resistance is to problems down the road. You were saying that it's a much higher indication than so many of these other factors that we might think. And then another thing that you mentioned that this is the part I may have gotten confused about, but you were saying like people's waistline tells like a huge story about future problems and stuff like that.
Absolutely, it does. Somebody's waist measurement, their waistline, waist circumference, as it's called, and as they call it, it's hugely indicative. So this insulin resistance that people have is usually or always accompanied by what is known as visceral fat, and this is fat that's inside the body. In other words, the fat you have out, underneath the skin, this is subcutaneous fat, and it is relatively benign as far as what it's doing to you physiologically. The fat inside your body, inside your abdominal cavity, you don't want that at all. And so insulin resistance and this visceral fat is highly correlated. And if somebody has a lot of visceral fat, then they have a big waistline. And so there's a very simple measurement. Your waistline should be 1/2 of your height or less for both men and women. And if it is 1/2 of your height or less, you're likely to be relatively insulin sensitive. If your waistline is bigger than that, you likely have some insulin resistance. Of course, testing gets a lot more sophisticated than that. Like you're saying, we can measure insulin, we can measure a lot of other lab indicators of insulin resistance, but that's the best way to tell. If somebody has a waist size that's larger than 1/2 their height, then they got to think, well, they probably have some degree of insulin resistance.
So insulin sounds like one of the most important things that's happening inside of your body as far as future heart cancer. I think you said something about one day about Alzheimer's being, what did you say about they call it
type 3 diabetes? Yeah. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, the human body is, of course, incredibly complex, but insulin is so important because insulin has a number of functions. One of its main functions is to store energy. So every time you eat, insulin, this hormone insulin, goes up, way up. And that is, of course, normal. That's what it's supposed to do. But it is supposed to come back down to the same place it started after you're done eating. And for people who are insulin resistant, this does not happen. It goes up and then might go down a little, but it stays at a higher level. And so people who have insulin resistance have high levels of insulin all the time. So what this does, because insulin is an energy storage hormone, then it keeps all the energy stored. In other words, say somebody has a lot of body fat, then if they have high insulin levels, the energy from their body fat can never leave and supply them with energy like it's supposed to. So, when you eat, when any of us eat, we obviously cannot burn the energy all at once. So it has to be stored. And then when we're done eating, and then in the time between meals, the energy comes out of the fat cells, and then we can use it. That's the normal process. But in people who are insulin resistant, the energy gets locked up into their body fat. Then, because they have no access to it, they're hungry. And their body senses, wait, hey, I don't have any energy here. Even though they might be 50, 100 pounds overweight, the body says, I don't have any energy here. I'm hungry. Let's eat. So they eat because they're hungry. And then as far as these illnesses, yes, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. I mean, these are all related to insulin resistance. The thing is it is so much of this is so tragic in my view, because some very simple steps would relieve a lot of suffering. I mean, when you think about people who have these things that we're talking about, these diseases, and they're either being misdirected, whether by the information they read or by their doctors or whatever, these things are not addressed. And it is a very real amount of suffering. I mean, if you think about somebody who has Alzheimer's disease, that's terrible. I mean, all illnesses are terrible, but something like dementia affects people in a way like nothing else does. I mean, that person is literally, in some sense, no longer there. So when you think of the possibilities of this being fixed with some relatively easy steps, let me give you another example: schizophrenia. So schizophrenia is the worst form of mental illness. It is disabling. It has a high suicide rate. This is the kind of illness where people are hearing voices in their head and this kind of thing. And they often have to be institutionalized or they're heavily drugged or whatever. It's an absolutely terrible thing that ruins lives. There are case reports of people going on a ketogenic diet, which basically means they stop eating carbohydrates and the schizophrenia goes away. So now, I'm not going to claim that this would happen in every single case, but we don't even know that, do we? Nobody's trying. I mean, in one case where this happened, a woman was very overweight, like 300 pounds or something, and she was schizophrenic, and she had a court-appointed guardian. She was on all kinds of drugs and all this, and she decided, I want to lose weight. So she read about the ketogenic diet and stopped eating carbohydrates, and like 2 to 3 weeks later, she realized her mental illness was going away. And this is, there are more and more examples. Eventually she became completely cured. No more guardian, no more drugs, living on her own, no more voices in her head, no more suicidal thoughts. So how much, something like 1% of the population has schizophrenia. So we're talking about a lot of suffering here, a lot of tragedy where people's lives are being ruined. And how much of that could be cured by a simple change in diet? How much Alzheimer's could be fixed by a simple change in diet? How much, heart disease or cancer could be prevented by a simple change in diet? In my opinion, a lot. But the problem is not too many people are looking. Not too many people are trying to spread this kind of message. A lot of the medical establishment scoffs at it.
Yeah. Well, I think what happens is I think we don't think about it in these terms. I think we think, well, the government says it's okay, or it's in the grocery store, so it must have been approved by somebody. And is it really? I know it's not good for me, but whenever you think about it in terms of the metabolic health and you start thinking about these studies that show these things, then it kind of starts hitting home a little bit more. I know for my case, that's why I was like, wow, this is starting to hit home. Like in our case, so I'll share this with the customers, the viewers. So in our case, I told you up front, I'm like a sugar fiend, and I stopped basically eating sugar for the most part, added sugar, I'll have some red wine and stuff like that, but I've cut out a lot of my sugar in my diet. I think I've had 2 pieces of pie since maybe Thanksgiving. So, but about 2 weeks after I stopped eating, and I was like a 6-year-old, I would walk around eating bags of candy and stuff. About 2 weeks after I stopped that, I stopped taking my diclofenac, which is anti-inflammation. And I was like, I'm going to try it for one day. And because I was like, my back's starting to feel pretty good. I'm going to try it for one day. I felt pretty good. So I was like, I'm going to try it for 2 days and just see what happens. And before this, I would have to hold a wall to get to the restroom if I didn't take this medicine because my inflammation was that bad. But I changed my diet, and just 2 weeks after that sugar, after I stopped that, I haven't taken it since then. Since that day that I said I'm going to see what happens one day, I haven't taken it since then. That was probably mid-December, and my back I feel like it feels like everybody else's. Now I've had some things to help me along the way to get me to this point to where I'm functioning back like normal. But I was still putting tons of inflammation in my body, that all the work that they did to get me back, I'm sabotaging. And that's what kind of made me say that, and then when you start talking to me about, I can tell my insulin levels are better now, or I don't know if that's the correct term, but I can tell that my insulin is better now than it was then. My energy level is out of control now. I very rarely drink caffeine. It's just my mind is sharper. My energy's better. I feel better. I don't care what I weigh on a scale. I just want to feel better, and that's the goal from this. And so sugar was the big one for me, I think, and carbs. I didn't eat enough protein. So let's jump into that. Let's jump into the importance of protein, because I know for me, that's kind of one of the things that you helped me understand, the importance of protein. And that's what I'm saying is I think that people want to be better. It's just they don't necessarily understand the true desperation that is, this is a real thing that's causing problems.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So protein. Protein is what's known as a macronutrient, the other 2 macronutrients being carbohydrates and fat. So we've got protein, carbohydrates, and fat. So people generally do not get enough protein. And this is not just my opinion. There's data to back this up. So what is going on here? So for protein is there are different qualities of protein. Okay, so there's plant protein and there's animal protein, and animal protein is generally a much higher quality of protein. So people need animal protein, but they're not getting enough. So part of this stems back from what I talked about before, the government telling people that saturated fat was going to kill them, so don't eat so much meat. So they complied, they ate less meat. Meat has a lot of protein in it, so they're getting less protein. And so by eating more protein, people can be less hungry. So this is basically the mechanism by which these government guidelines helped obesity, because now people are eating less protein, so they're hungrier. So therefore, because they're hungrier, they eat more. And then because they eat more, they get overweight. So that's the basic idea here. And the other basic idea being, if you eat more protein, you can lose weight because now you're not as hungry. And of course, there are some provisos there, that you don't want to be eating all the time. You want to be cognizant of how hungry you really are. But that's the way. So like if people did something like, instead of having a bowl of cereal for breakfast or a Frappuccino, have some eggs. So eggs have a lot of protein, and that's going to keep you full and satisfied all morning long. Whereas proverbially, the people who have the bowl of cereal for breakfast are starving by 10 a.m. And lack of protein is one reason. So it's all very important. People don't get enough. And if they get more protein, this can help prevent diabetes. It can help prevent obesity, and it can help treat obesity as well. So it is all very important. Besides meat, other high protein foods are eggs, fish, dairy products. Those all have a lot of protein. So, people should emphasize those if they want to lose weight or stay at a lean weight.
Yeah, I can tell that when you told me how much protein that I needed every day, I wasn't even close. And now that I'm hitting that mark or getting, I don't count calories. That's one of the things you told me. Don't count your calories.
Right.
But I've got, okay, if I get this much in the morning and this much for lunch and this much in the evening, then I'm going to be right around where I need to be. And I've noticed that's one of the big things is I'm not hungry all the time. I don't snack a lot during the day, and I don't find myself being hungry I've become so much more productive because I'm not hungry, which makes me tired, which makes me it's kind of like that downward spiral. I'm pretty much going until the next meal. And I think that protein has helped me with that a lot. And it's kind of interesting to say eat more protein and you lose weight, but it does. I mean, it makes sense.
Right. Absolutely. It's a startling difference going from eating like a high carb or junk food diet, and where you have to eat regularly on schedule because you get so hungry. And when you start eating more protein, it just changes everything. I mean, where you just like, all of a sudden you're going, wait, I was supposed to eat lunch an hour ago and I forgot because you're just not that hungry. Yeah, it works.
Yeah. I got a couple more things to get to you. I know you're busy, but I got a couple more little things. What are your thoughts on intermittent fasting or intermittent fast, whatever that word is? What are your thoughts on that? I know that's kind of a thing now.
Yeah, sure.
A lot on YouTube and all of that.
So intermittent fasting is great, and more people should do it. The thing is that if people try to do intermittent fasting, but they're still eating the same food the rest of the time, that is probably not going to be a very big help at all. Maybe a little bit, but you want to get the diet right first. Otherwise, though, fasting is a very healthy thing to do. I know it's kind of weird. I mean, most Americans probably, if you told them to skip a meal, they would be like, what? They couldn't even imagine it. Whereas it is a very healthy thing to do. So and there are very sound biological reasons for this, why intermittent fasting is healthy. Most of us could stand to do a lot more of it.
Do you recommend it daily, or do you recommend it certain amount of days a week, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, so it kind of depends on who's doing it and what their goals are. Somebody who people can do it daily, definitely. Somebody whose main goal was to lose weight, yeah, they should probably be doing 16 hours intermittent fasting every day, and that can work for other people too. Probably the only people that I would say to stay away from intermittent fasting were people who wanted to gain weight, whether we're talking about a bodybuilder or somebody else who needed to gain weight. But as you can imagine, that's a pretty small fraction of the population. So for the rest of us, intermittent fasting is a good thing to do.
And real quick, scientifically, even if we have to nerd out for a minute, scientifically, why is intermittent fasting?
Yeah. So
How does it work, and why does it work?
Right. Okay. So there are a number of things that it does, but probably central to what is going on here is a process called autophagy, or as some people say, autophagy. And so what is autophagy? It is a process that occurs in the cells and basically recycles junk. So your cells are making biomolecules all the time, and these biomolecules have a lifespan, right? Because they can get damaged and so on. So your body continually recycles everything. So it does this mainly through this process of autophagy. Now, another thing about autophagy is that it declines with age. So it is not strongly induced the older someone is. And furthermore, this is associated with many diseases and so on. So and autophagy is strongly promoted by fasting. So when people do fasting, if it's long enough, so 16 hours, by the time somebody's fasting 16 hours, that's long enough. Fasting longer than that keeps the whole process going. They are strongly inducing autophagy. Now, in the various studies in animals that have looked at life extension, so where they do some kind of intervention on animals and they live a whole lot longer because of this intervention, whether it's a drug or whether it's fasting or anything else, they find that autophagy is absolutely crucial to this process. It is an essential part of lifespan extension, autophagy. So by fasting, you promote this process of autophagy, you promote the fact that your body is renewing itself, and you promote extended lifespan.
It's amazing, man. It's amazing. I lost some weight quick whenever I started intermittent fast. I lost a lot of visceral fat very, very quickly. Right. So two more things, and then we'll get out of here. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of giving blood? Because this is something that I'd never thought about, and why that's important in our body.
Sure. So all human beings, all animals, virtually all life forms require iron as an essential nutrient. So biologically, we seek out iron. In other words, we absorb it from our food, and our body wants to have it. Unfortunately, excess iron can be bad, but we have no regulated way of getting rid of iron. Now, this is a problem that is more important in men and in postmenopausal women. So women who are of childbearing age generally have low levels of iron. In fact, it can be so low that they can become anemic, which is, of course, a different kind of problem. Mm-hmm. But men and older women typically develop higher levels of iron, and this can be detrimental. It is associated with heart disease, cancer, and all these other diseases, diabetes and Alzheimer's and so on. Lots of evidence that shows that iron is involved. And so by donating blood, when you donate blood, your red blood cells are the quantitatively most important depot of iron in your body. So by donating red blood cells, you are getting rid of iron. So this is important. If you keep iron levels in the low normal range, you're much more likely to be healthy and to prevent various chronic diseases. And so this is, like I said, this is especially important for men and for older women. So people can get a test. It's called a ferritin test, which shows your level of iron. Unfortunately, this is an area, again, most mainstream healthcare ignores. There is such a thing as a pathologically high level of iron. This is a disease called hemochromatosis, and this is recognized by mainstream healthcare. But if you're anything short of hemochromatosis, it's unlikely anybody's going to care or do anything about it. So that's where blood donation comes in.
Okay. And lastly, let's talk a little bit about muscle. And it's not just for good looks and everything, but especially as we get older, obviously, why is it important Why should people care about having more muscle? And what is the way for you do we have to go to the gym 7 days a week? Or I like your thoughts on this. It's not as difficult as people think, you know.
Absolutely, it isn't. And this idea that you have to be in the gym all the time to build muscle is one of those things that, again, creates some mischief, because people think that it just, it takes so much time and so much work. Okay, why is muscle important? Well, so skeletal muscle is a big part of our bodies, a big percentage of our bodies, and it's important for our metabolism. We were just talking about metabolic health a bit ago. So if you want to have good metabolic health, you want to have a good amount of muscle on your body, and you want to make sure it's in good working order. And this is going to be, again, if you have a good amount of muscle mass, this is going to help prevent things like heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, and so on. Furthermore, you lose muscle as you age. So it can be detected as early as, even before age 30, that people don't have as much muscle as they did when they were 20. And so it starts at a trickle, but with each passing decade becomes more and more. So, by the time somebody is, let's say, 70 years old, they could lose 2, 3 or more % of their muscle mass every single year. So this is a disaster. It's a disaster for metabolic health. So this makes people more insulin resistant, poor metabolic health, and so on. If you want to take it to its ultimate conclusion, people become frail and dependent. So, if somebody, and this is a frequent occurrence with older people, they get to the point where they literally can't get out of their chair without somebody helping them. And when that happens, then that's not good either, because now they're dependent on somebody to just help them live their daily lives. And this is the sort of situation that often leads them to a nursing home. So you want to build muscle, and it's even, it's important for everybody, and you want to start relatively young, sure, but it's even more important for older people because you lose muscle, and it's important for men and women both. And so everybody should do some form of resistance training, strength training, and people can put on muscle. There are studies showing people, 80-year-olds, 90-year-olds putting on muscle if they start resistance training. So it can be done. Then, to your question, no, you don't need to spend all your time in the gym. So if you know how to do it and you train with sufficient intensity, then an hour a week, maybe even less, is sufficient for putting on muscle. But again, unfortunately, like with so many of the other things we talked about, this idea is not very mainstream. If you go, read a magazine about strength training or about bodybuilding or something, most of those are going to tell you, you got to go to the gym all the time, an hour a day or 2 hours a day or something like that. It's simply not true. But unfortunately, that's people's understanding. And so I suppose most people think this is going to be too much trouble, so they don't do it. But building muscle is very important for everybody.
Yeah. Okay. How can people reach you if they want to find out more?
So I'm on Twitter. My handle on Twitter is Mangan150. That's my last name, Mangan, with a 150 after. That's probably the best place. That's where I hang out. I have a website called roguehealthandfitness.com. And those are the places to reach me.
Okay, cool, man. Well, I know that you're busy. I know that you have appointments all day, every day, seems like. But I definitely appreciate you taking the time to come in and to do this virtual. Who would have ever thought we would be at this point in the world, huh?
Yeah, right. Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thanks for inviting me, Ronnie. I'm glad you asked me.
Yeah, so I hope everybody watching this enjoyed it as much as I did. I hope that, like I said at the beginning, my goal is for somebody to get some information out of them that may pique their curiosity and at least take the first step down the right road. Because I want to see people healthy. I want to see our area become more healthy and just healthier and happier. And I hope that people watching this interview, that at least leads them at least on the first step. So I want to say thank you to all of our awesome partners who make this show possible. Without you guys, we don't have anything. So thank you for that. I want to say thank you to everybody watching. God bless. And as always, have a champion day.
y'all, it's Juliana Wallace, and if you like what we're doing here at Miss Lou Champion Spotlight, make sure to like, follow, and share on all of our social media platforms. It costs you nothing, and it helps us continue to spread positivity all throughout the Miss Lou. Hey y'all, Juliana and Ronnie with Miss Lou Champion Spotlight, and we're here to tell you about one of our awesome partners, Wardo's Poboys.
Wardo's Poboys was created in honor of Alan Ward Granning III, fondly known by family and friends as Wardo.
In 2019, the oldest brother of the tribe passed away unexpectedly. His remaining siblings and loved ones wanted to honor his memory in a special way.
In 2022, Ward's family decided to combine the need for a sandwich shop in downtown Natchez with the desire to pay tribute to Ward's love of good friends, good times, and great food.
Through blood, sweat, tears, and countless hours of hard work, Wardo's was born. So go visit Wardo's at 309 North Broadway Street in Natchez.
Where the po' boys are so good, you'll swear you're in Cajun country. Hey guys, Ronnie and Juliana here with Miss Lou Champion Spotlight. We want to tell you about our awesome partners, J.E. Hicks Distributing Company, also known as Hicks Chiks.
Hicks Chiks is a local, family-owned food distribution company that has been serving the Miss Lou since 1945. You already know they serve all of your favorite restaurants, but did you know they are also open to the public?
Hicks has a wide variety of food products, including delicious heat-and-eat options like chicken and dumplings, white bean chicken chili, lasagna, and gumbo. They also carry a wide variety of seafood options like shrimp, crabs, tuna steak, salmon, and catfish.
Don't forget about their famous TNT burgers that are already pattied up for you, and their amazing dessert options.
So go see the awesome team at Hicks Chiks at 1380 MLK Jr. Road in Natchez.
Hicks Chiks, way more than just chicken.
Welcome to your new hospital, Trinity Medical. Located in Faraday, Trinity Medical is the only acute care facility in the Tri-Parish area. Here you will find an active pursuit of holistic health, a strong, honest group of clinicians, and a consciousness of others that transcends the 80,000 square feet committed to you and your loved ones. Trinity Medical. People you know, caring for people you love.
Hey y'all, Juliana and Ronnie with Miss Lou Champion Spotlight, and we're here to tell you about our awesome partner, Natchez Heating and Cooling.
That's right. Our friends at Natchez Heating and Cooling are here for you. They make sure you never have to worry about your home's health or efficiency. They have an expert team who can take care of all of your AC, heating, plumbing, and electrical needs. When you need them, they show up. It's as simple as that.
So call our friends at Natchez Heating and Cooling today, and make sure to tell them you heard about them from Miss Lou Champion Spotlight.
Hey guys, Ronnie Calhoun here with Miss Lou Champion Spotlight. We want to tell you about our awesome partner, Dr. Gregg and Gregg Veterinary Hospital. Gregg Veterinary Hospital has been providing comprehensive, reliable, cutting-edge veterinary services to pets in the Miss Lou since 2002. They welcome pets of all shapes and sizes who are in need of emergency treatment or who require routine medical, surgical, and dental care. Dr. Gregg and his team offer a long list of services, including in-house laboratory diagnostics, digital x-ray, soft tissue, orthopedic surgery, dental care, extractions, laser surgery, laser therapy, preventative health, and wellness plans. And if you need grooming and boarding services, they do that too. So call Gregg Veterinary Hospital today. Hey guys, Ronnie Calhoun here with Miss Lou Champion Spotlight. I want to tell you about our awesome partners, Moxey. And we want to welcome the Moxey Network to the Miss Lou. Moxey is a community of thousands of business owners who buy and sell with each other without spending cash. Instead, they use their very own community currency, Moxey dollars. Moxey will help you take current assets and services and leverage them through trading to get what you need now without spending cash. This leads to new customers and improved cash flow. Moxey has over 10 years of helping business owners thrive with a whopping $268 million in total new business for their 4,000 plus members. If your business is interested in learning more about the brand new Miss Lou Moxey network, reach out to Rick Green at 318-545-2450. In 1991, Rick closed out LSU's first national championship in baseball, and now he's helping close deals across North Louisiana and the Miss Lou. But don't just take it from me. Take it from Mart, Wardo's, and over 470 businesses in the Monroe area, including our great friends at Waterfront Grill. We look forward to doing Moxey business with your business soon.